Hey everyone, thanks again for joining another freaking awesome episode of Sweat Success. I've got an awesome guy on today, Trey Moser. He has done a lot in the industry already and is doing even more. He's worked with Crunch Fitness, he's worked with Planet Fitness. Now he's doing some consulting and he's working in a completely different category today, helping move the industry forward. I want to welcome today as our guest, Trey Moser. Thanks for joining the show, man.
Michael, man, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Of course. So we're going to jump right into this because you've got some pretty great experience. And, when I think about businesses and gyms and kind of where they go, one component is obviously, marketing, sales, strategy, the things that kind of get things moving. But at the end of the day, if things aren't operating well, then everything falls apart. And that's
Sure.
really where you have grounded yourself, is in the operations. You've been the COO of a group with Crunch. You've been the COO of Planet Fitness Group, and overseeing nearly 60 locations. And you've got a lot of insights into how you kind of really build this operations, how you build this machine to make sure things don't fall apart. And one of the biggest things that I wanted to ask you right off the top is, what strategy or initiative you've kind of implemented in the past to improve member retention? Because that's a topic that is common across the board for almost every gym owner, is how can I retain the people that I've already worked so hard to get? They spend a lot of money trying to get them in the door, and within a couple of weeks, that same customer is already thinking about whether or not they want to cancel. They're on that fence. Do they jump over and not stay, or do they jump in and kind of find some kind of positive reinforcement? So how do you guys do that with member retention? Or I should
It's a
say you.
hot.
I mean, you were the one doing it.
Sure, it's a really hot topic, and it's probably the most important topic in the industry because, like you said, Michael, there's so much energy, time, resource, effort into getting the door to swing, as we say, right? To get folks in the door, and it's really, the price point gets them in the door. The $10 a month, or the $15 a month, or the dollar down, or whatever you're doing
Mm-hmm.
externally will get them in the door. It's how you're going to keep them once they get in there. It starts with culture. I think we spent a ton of time, and that may be something like, oh, here's another one of the guys saying culture, but it's something that is the utmost importance. The member has to feel that their experience in the gym is something like they would experience at home. They have to feel that. They have to feel the warm welcome. They have to feel that this place is clean, that this place is friendly, and then I'm going to there's a lot of variety here. I'm going to get a good workout. And if for whatever reason I don't know what I'm doing, someone's going to help me, right? I'm not going to just sign the dotted line, walk in the next day for a workout, and I'll never speak to somebody else again. So it starts at the front. Once they sign the dotted line, and even if they don't, right, you got to make them feel welcome. You got to make them know that the club is clean. They know that the team members are friendly. It's really making it easy to enter the door, inquire about a membership, feel comfortable doing so. And I think the member feedback and acknowledgement once they're there for quite some time is going to be really crucially important. You got to have a process for them to give you feedback. It's not just that they come in and say, I don't like it. Well, let's have a platform for them to voice their opinions, right? And to make sure that if there is an area of opportunity for us to improve, we like to think that we're as clean as we can be. We like to think that we are friendly as we can be. We like to think that we offer the biggest value with the most amenities. But what does the consumer think? And I think the worst consumer is the one that says nothing or doesn't tell you anything at all. And so you got to be able to create a platform and an environment where they can give you feedback and acknowledge that feedback, and then ultimately do something about it, right? I mean, not every piece of feedback you get you're gonna take action on, but the majority of it you got to listen, hear them out, and then if it's a valuable and if it's valuable, then you need to make the adjustments, right? And I think I guess the fourth thing, and maybe final, was that, and it may be tied into the experience, but the team member has to be trained on creating a value proposition and the efficiency of the tour. You can't just come in to one of these gyms and expect that the team member is going to know what to say, when to say, and how to say it. And so the tour efficiency, creating value propositions around the membership, and then being able to close the membership, all that culminates into, do you have the right team on board?
So you brought something up that I thought was, interesting, is that culture fit, right? And that gets thrown around everywhere. You got to have the right culture. You got to have the right culture. What the hell does that mean, right? So
Sure.
you look at this, and one of the things that I remember, I mean, this is going back years, and I was working with a group with Gold's Gym, and one of the things they wanted us to do was pick up the phone. When we picked up the phone, we would say, "How can we, thanks for calling Gold's Gym. How can we change your life today?" That was the phrase they wanted to use, and I thought it was a good one because it changed the way that maybe the tone on the other end of that person was, how they were going to potentially approach the next portion of the conversation, because you
Sure.
immediately snapped them into a different way of thinking. How can we change your life today? Um, but at the same token, it can also be perceived in the wrong light. Like, why are you wanting to change my life? Who are you? Uh, you're some kid on the other end of the phone. But then I've also been on the other end of the spectrum, where recently I was actually calling several club locations. This group, they've got a lot of locations, and I was calling several club locations on their behalf to shop them. And
Right.
I was just, it was almost jaw dropping to call a location. And because technology exists and you have the opportunity to forward phone calls to somebody else's cell phone, then
Right.
the person on the other end picks up the phone and they say, "Hello," and you're calling the club. You're trying to
You're
figure
right.
out what's going on. Like, do I have the right number?
Right.
So I think it starts with, to your point, developing culture. But at the same token, when you're developing this culture, how are you approaching it as the COO, or how are you approaching it as an executive? And how are you kind of pulling this through the rest of the team? Because a big part of it is hiring the right staff. If you don't have somebody who's actually interested in fitness, interested in making sure that they're nurturing and taking care of people, like, you're going nowhere.
Right.
So what did you guys do? What were the main things that you had to coach on and teach on? Because I'm sure you guys had scripts that you said, "Hey, follow this," but at the same token, you have somebody follow a script and they sound like a robot on the other end,
Right. Right.
right? And it sounds ingenuine when they're talking to somebody. So, what were the things that you focused on to make sure that this culture, this club culture, was built, so you really had real people who actually gave a shit about
Right.
taking care of others who are walking in the door?
Sure. Yeah. Again, it's the loose term. It's one that's thrown around all the time. But if you aren't intentional with the way that you build it, then it's just that. It's another loose term that everyone uses. And we, it's interesting. We took maybe a couple of different approaches to how we built what we thought was a good culture. The first one, of course, is through the interview process to make sure that they fit, that they believe what we believe, they have our values, they are hard workers, their work ethic is top notch. We didn't the experience in the past was important, but it was more about, what can you do for us and how are you going to fit into our team, as opposed to what you did, 10 years ago. And the other thing is that we paid significantly higher for top level talent, and from whether that was a GM or assistant GM or hourly team member, we were ultimately competitive in what we paid, because we didn't want, once we identified top talent, we didn't want those people to just leave because the guy next door paid him a few extra bucks, right? And we took a really big initiative on team building. We took it once a year, every quarter, depending on region. We had a big community, a big team member, really team building event that helped us just continue to gain camaraderie and keep it that way. Like I said, we from a financial standpoint, we were very, very competitive. The bonus structure was very favorable to the GM, so that the things that were coming down from the top, myself and others, that they had they wanted to work for us. They enjoyed who we were, but money talks, right? And so we wanted money there to make sure that it was attainable, that they could actually reach it. And wasn't just, oh, you have X amount of dollars a month to make, good luck. We put them on the right path to be able to coach their teams, to develop and implement the culture that we wanted it to, and we wanted them to, and ultimately max their bonus potential out. And we took that approach. Sometimes it didn't work because for whatever reason, but most of the time, once people bought in, they knew that we were genuine. They knew that we were real. They knew that we were, I love to use the word, we had a lot of vulnerability from the executive team. And we knew the struggles because most of us had been at the club level already before in our past. And so we could relate to the struggles and the challenges that the club level managers were experiencing, as well as doing tours and cleaning and all the things that are involved with operating a fitness space. And so we took all those things and combined them, right? And it really worked well for us because they knew that what we said was true because they could see it, and also that we weren't just throwing the word culture around. We developed culture through financial, we developed culture through team building, we developed culture through camaraderie amongst clubs, and it starts with just identifying the talent to make sure that they fit with what you're trying to accomplish.
So would you say, you're saying hire right basically and pay them well? Uh, are the would those be like the two higher category items that you would pick out of the bunch to develop a good culture? Starting there, making
Start
sure
there.
you're hiring right. Okay.
Start there.
So
Don't
with
just
that, no, go ahead. I want to hear what you had to say. I cut you
that
off. Sorry.
no. Don't just and there's desperate times, I guess, calls for desperate measures. But we spent a ton of time in leadership and development to making sure that when we needed to fill a role, because we spent so much time on building our team and creating an environment where they loved to work with us, that we didn't want to hire necessarily from the outside. And so whether it was training and development or coaching and leadership, or certainly the pay was an aspect, that we wanted those people, once they came on our team, to work their way up through the ranks, right? And not have just because of a dollar next door that they would leave. And so we spent a lot of time on coaching, training, development, not just from a professional standpoint. We really wanted them to understand who they were personally and help them through the process of what they're trying to figure out to do with their life. And if that was not with us, that's okay. But we wanted them to really feel that we cared, and we showed that through the things I just described.
So with that, one of the things that in your world, right? Net promoter scores, a big thing. At least I think for some of the larger operations, they're always looking at this net promoter score. What are the customers saying? You mentioned earlier, the customer that doesn't talk doesn't help you much. So, what is it that you guys would use for net promoter score? How did you manage getting feedback from customers? Like, if there was a way for me when I called these clubs and it's pushing it to somebody else's phone number who's, they're taking their break and they're picking it up saying hello. If I, at the end of that call, had an opportunity to say something or provide some kind of score associated with my experience, that would have been a good thing. Because otherwise, if I'm a disgruntled client or disgruntled potential customer, I might leave a bad review on Google, right?
Sure.
And then that goes the other direction. That because a lot of people are looking you up online nowadays. So
You're right.
how do you manage that from a technology perspective? And do they carry enough weight for you to make decisions in the company?
No, they didn't carry. It was something that we took note of, whether that was a Yelp review, Google review, what we call there's this happy or not station, this brand out here that basically brings a station into a location. It's got 4 or 5 different faces on it, right? One's happy, one's sort of
Right.
sad, not really happy, one's really mad, right? And you could just click those as you walked out. What we found is that people are just clicking them and they have no reason to. So that was certainly not one that we didn't take seriously. What we did was because of how large we were, we had 600,000 members, give or take, in our franchise. And so there's a lot of feedback, right? There's a lot of opportunity for someone to, hopefully on any given day they're happy, but there's a lot of opportunity for them to tell us that they're not happy. And we built a whole member services team. We had a director of member services, and they could email this member services team, this shared email account. I would encourage something like this for feedback. It seemed to be the most tactful and successful way of responding back, because all the members had the same email to respond to, right? And to put feedback in. It wasn't something that we necessarily judged or that we wanted to score on. We wanted real feedback. And because these were real people checking the inbox, right? And they were real people calling you back. It wasn't a robot. It wasn't an automated response. It wasn't, I'm going to forward you to another phone number from a guy sitting on the couch with a cell phone.
Yeah.
It was a team, and all they did was respond to and deal with member feedback. And some may not have the resource, some may not have from a financial standpoint or a personnel standpoint, but if you could just get a couple people to create this email account.
How many people per 1,000 customers do you think you need? Or did you guys measure it like that? I mean,
we didn't measure it like that. We had a team of 10 with one director that would manage 65, 70 locations. It fit for us. It worked.
Five people for 600,000 customers.
Give or take.
You got to have okay. So most of the gyms are not going to be as robust in membership base as you guys. So what would their other option be?
I think that
what could they do?
You go with whatever a lot of people do, right? You just depend on social media. You depend on feedback on Google. You depend on feedback on Yelp. You want the manager at that specific club location to deal with feedback. And most of the time, if you train the GM enough and they buy into what you're trying to do, and ultimately, and most importantly, they, as the GM, know that their director of ops or their regional VP or their COO has their back on a response, that GM is confident in giving feedback or responding to a complaint. And we also found very much success in doing that. It wasn't that we wanted the member to duck the GM or to go right to corporate, which they had the access to do so, or to go right to member service. We wanted them to deal with the GM specifically if it was something that the GM could handle. Now, if the member didn't want to talk to the GM because of whatever reason, then you, of course, escalate it. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, if you can get and train and coach and lead and get autonomy to the GM to be able to respond to these, then that's going to be your best solution.
So did you have, going back to that group that I went through and, shopped. Not only did I shop them over the phone, but I shopped them online. And I noticed with their online feed, they had these canned autoresponders for Google reviews. And it was so funny because one of the customers who was clearly irate about a situation put a response into the Google review and said, and please don't, and then they copied the canned response. Don't respond with this. And they copied the canned response. And then right as soon as they submitted it, you see underneath it, the gym business responding with that canned response. So were you guys across the board, because you talk about social media, were you guys across the board having a group of people actually talking without canned responses? Like they were just trained up to have empathy for the consumer and actually talk them through things rather than having these canned responses. Because I've seen the scripts for canned responses for both sales and for operations. Right. And sometimes you can get yourself in some muddy water.
You can.
How did you guys handle that?
We didn't use any canned responses. Again, we it was something that we took in high regard. We wanted, if the experience was bad, we wanted to address it head on. We had a sundown rule, which has been a rule forever for a lot of different industries, that either the member services representative or the GM, hopefully the GM, will respond and inquire about the complaint before they leave for the day. And it was a standard operating procedure that we had. That was the expectation. Even if they didn't have a solution, even if they didn't have the right answer, we wanted the GM or someone from our company organization to acknowledge and recognize that we understand and we hear you, right? From a employee to a member standpoint. And it was really important that we did that, because half the time when you do respond like that and have that sort of attentive to the responses, their defenses typically go down at least half, right? And they're not as angry, or they're not as mad, or they're not as confrontational, because they just recognize that, hey, there's 10,000 members at this gym, and they just took the time, and I just submitted it this morning to say, hey, I don't have an answer for you right now, but I'll get one in the next 48 hours. So
Okay.
I would encourage to if it's a club level leader, it could be a really well trained team lead at the front desk. It could be a team of member services reps. It doesn't have to be that you just respond before the day's over. Even if you don't have the right answer, you always respond so that they know you're listening.
So that brings me to, you got so you have the problem, you have the responses. You guys are measuring this not necessarily with an NPS. You guys don't have automations go out. You're hiring the right people, and then you're giving the right amount of compensation to keep these people, so good people stay. That way, obviously, the good people are having these qualified conversations with these customers, uh,
Exactly. Yep.
and actually caring. But then that brings me to, what's the attrition rate? Like, what is the attrition rate? It sounds like you guys had a, pretty good closed loop on how you managed disgruntled customers and trying to maintain in those members. So what was the attrition rate for you overall, and what should be expected? Because if you have that good of a member, if you have that good of a system, your member retention should be pretty high, right? So what is that attrition rate? How many people are you losing every month, and what should everybody else listening to this, what should that marker be? So they go, okay, well, I'm below that marker, I'm doing great. I'm above that marker, I need to improve some stuff.
Sure. In the industry standards anywhere, it's measured differently amongst different brands and different sectors of the industry. But the industry standards anywhere from 2.5 to 4%, right? We were at about 3 per location,
Mm-hmm.
per club, per month, right? I mean, we weren't exceptionally great, we weren't exceptionally bad. And I think some of that comes with just being a volume brand. You just have a bunch of people, naturally you're going to lose some, right? Regardless of if you try to
Right.
save them, or you have a program to try to save them, or you waive their cancellation fee. Naturally, you're just going to have some folks that want to leave, or that need to leave, or that for whatever reason, right? And so, our brand, and specifically our franchise, wasn't unlike any other. I think that what really separated us in the attrition arena, I guess, as it relates to response times of complaints, net promoter scores, if you want to tag that, or social media negativity or positivity, was that we created an environment for our GMs to be able to respond and feel confident in doing
Mm-hmm.
so. And they saw the member, when I say they, the member saw that, oh, these guys are on it, because this response time is unheard of. This response time, usually I get a week, and I'll get a canned response, to your point. That it was the utmost priority for us. We wanted to keep it, ideally it's a little lower in attrition, but we wanted to keep it at that 2.5, 3%. And we felt that if our response times, the quicker they were and addressing a concern, then the better we were off. And it starts with the things I talked about earlier: hiring the right people, building the right culture, paying them correctly, giving them the autonomy to make the responses. And really, we were of the point, we stood on the side of the fence that GM was the business owner of that location. They saw some people disagree, and I've heard it when I tell people this. They saw all of the cash flows for that specific location. They knew exactly their top line, their bottom line, and everything in between. The only thing they didn't know was how much their regional manager was making, or the CEO was making, or I was, right. And they just didn't see that. But other than those few things, they saw everything that had to do with their financials of that specific club. It, again, gives them more autonomy. We trust that they're going to be able to take this information and do with it what they may to better their business. And one of them was giving them full responsibility on responding to any sort of response from a member.
I'd imagine you guys were compensating as well on net profit of the location. It was probably a little bit of both, right? Like compensation is on gross and also on net profit and also on members. And there's probably all these other bonuses you guys had kind of tied to those numbers.
So we created what was called a key performance indicator scorecard. And we had, it was probably a 10-line scorecard. There was a section of it that was the member experience section. How quickly did you respond? What's your attrition rate? How clean is your club? What scores did you get from corporate on cleanliness and friendliness, right? And there's a section of it on your financials, your EBITDAs, your payroll percent to revenue, your retail revenue. And then there was a section on employee retention. How are you training your employees? Do they believe what you believe? How are you going to get them to do that? How are you going to get them to take the proper tour and to go through the process of getting certified, right? And so anyway, there's a lot of different sections to that scorecard, and it all comes back to giving them the power and the flexibility and the autonomy to make the decisions. Not that we weren't involved, that their regional manager wasn't involved. In fact, they were highly involved. We sat down with them every month and reviewed their scorecard with them line by line. And we made specific action items on things that we missed this month and what we're going to do this month to better next month. So we were open book. We had no reservations on giving them empowerment, showing them financials, and letting them respond and deal with member issues.
How long do your GMs typically stay in a club? And the reason why I ask that is because, to your point, some people don't agree with that, and they don't. I would imagine the reason why they don't agree with it is because you're opening up a can of worms where the GM, if they're loose-lipped, they tell the rest of their team, and if the GM themselves are not bothered by how much money you're making, then the people that they tell get bothered by how much money you're making, and you could potentially lose people simply because of that. So how did you guys manage that? And really, how many GMs stuck around? Because someone might go, all right, well, I'm a general manager here. I've got all the information about the P&Ls. I know exactly what they're doing for their sales process and everything else that they're doing for their marketing. I can go not necessarily down the road because there's restrictions on those non-competes, but they could go somewhere else. Maybe they go move back home, which is a different state, and open up the exact same model and grow it. So is there ever fear of that within your guys' organizations when you're doing this?
I think I lost you there real quick, Michael, but
yeah,
there was no fear in, naturally you're going to lose people, but if we brought them in to our organization, there was a base of salary expectation that no matter what, starting out, this is whatever, we leveled the playing field from the start. And anything that you make extra is either one, your tenure with us, a combination of two things: one, tenure; two, performance. And we did a bunch of different calculations to determine what that percentage increase was going to be year over year for that salary. But everyone has a level playing field starting out. And we didn't want one person to come in at X amount and the other person to come in $10,000 lower, right? We wanted them all to have a level playing field from the start. And so that automatically took some of the reservation once they saw some P&Ls to say, oh, well, the reason why he's making more is, number one, he's been here longer, and frankly, number two, his club's performing better than I am, right? And so it just created some friendly competition amongst GMs that said, "Hey, how are you making that?" Well, here's what I'm doing to better perform my club, right? And here's what I'm doing to hire team members that stay longer. Here's what I'm doing to get better member reviews and how I'm responding to them. Here's what I'm doing to increase my EBITDAs or my retail
Mm-hmm.
sales or whatever the case may be, right? And so it worked for us. It doesn't work for everybody, but it worked for us because we wanted these folks to stay. Our average GM stayed 2 years, if not longer. There's some
Okay.
GMs that I was there. See, I was with Planet 2 years ago, so 8 years. GMs have been there 8 years.
Oh, wow.
Still a
Okay.
GM. Probably 5 of them I can name personally, and still there today. Some of which have moved up in the organization and now director of operations or VP of ops or whatever the case is, but they work their way up, right? And the other thing that you have to, when you're hiring a GM, like anything else or anybody else or any of the industry, is that they have to know what their trajectory is. Where can they go? What's the ceiling here? Okay, I'm making X amount and I'm in this
Right.
role. What's my next opportunity and how much does it get me? And based on performance and KPIs and tenure and all that, yes. But if I check all those boxes, how do I get to a regional VP or a VP or director? How do I get there, right? And here's a path. And
Mm-hmm.
what about after that, right? You don't want to get too far down the road, but they want to know. They want to know how much, what's the potential, what's the ceiling of compensation, and what role is the highest I can get to. And if they know that they are making a little bit less than their other GM, number one, they're going to work harder to make more. Number two, they're going to work harder to get to that next step or that next role or making more in another role, right? And so, again, it comes down to just some friendly competition, and it worked really well for us.
Can you give a an example of what a good comp plan would look like for GM?
Sure. So we always paid competitive to market, tenure. Yes, experience was important, but really, did they fit what we were trying to do? Most importantly, how are they as a person? And we started all of our GMs. There's a little bit of fluctuation, but generally speaking, we started all our GMs at 45,000, and they had about a percent to 2% increase year over year based on performance and how long they were there. And really, we
That's
also
base
looked at
salary, right?
right, right. Yeah, some were
Okay.
making significantly more than that, significantly more because they performed better. They lead coached and developed people underneath them, and those people are now GMs, right? So there's compensation attached to that. There's compensation, of course, attached to your specific club and how you sell and how you close and how you lead a team and how you deal with member experience. And then you may get another club right under your belt. It's kind of a senior GM, and there's compensation attached to that. So, we increased that base salary, 1 to 2% a year, depending on the person and the circumstance. And then we generally capped it at 60 to 70,000 plus bonuses, and
Okay.
they had opportunity to make significantly more in bonuses. It could be $10,000 or $15,000 more per year in bonuses based on all the things that I talked about a little bit ago.
What's the potential of the highest earnings that you could have in that role, from base salary, all the commissionables, all the bonuses? What would be the highest potential earnings someone could earn?
80,000, 75, 80,000
Okay.
for one single unit, right? And
And what kind of revenue would right?
those
And
locations
what kind of
were,
revenue would a
yeah, they were the revenue of a location averaged about $1 million a month per location.
okay? So that rolls me right into kind of managing the gym staff, right? So we talked a little bit about how you keep the members happy, the retention, the attrition rates, and how you're hiring for these people. Uh, Was there ever like a challenge that you ever had, that you were part of within one of the businesses or within one of the locations, and you had to address a staff challenge, um, whether it be a specific person and or it could just be limited staff or too many staff, right, for the amount of revenue that the business is bringing in?
Sure. We we averaged about 15 team members per location. That was kind of our foundation for, I guess, amount of team members that you need to run successfully. I mean, like anybody else, right? 2020 to 2022 was some of the toughest staffing challenges that
Mm-hmm.
maybe some people have ever experienced because of all the things that we went through in those couple of years. And, no one wanted to work, or it was too competitive of pay next door for the same role, incentive offerings at competitors, paying them absorbent amounts of money to do a very simple task, or, the hourly rates were higher, or for whatever reason, right? And so it became some of the toughest challenges because of all those things. And also, we we tried to get people to stick or stay because of the environment that we created. Yes, we were competitive with pay, but more importantly, you're going to enjoy to work here, and that was our top priority. We ended up on average running 10, 9, 8 team members per location for a while in those few years because the GM have end up picking up a lot of slack because it was just a tough time to get people to work. And so, but we did keep all of our team members, specifically GMs, during those couple of years on payroll, even if we weren't allowed to be open, depending on where we were in the country. So that was part of the culture that we wanted to instill. Hey, no matter what, right, we're going to have your back, and we're gonna pay you even if you can't come to work. And so that really set well with them. They knew that we had their back regardless of extenuating circumstances that were out of all of our control. So when we got back is kind of when the real staffing issues got really started. Like, oh wow, this is a real challenge because we couldn't keep everybody, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the people decided to go take other things or do other jobs or whatever the case is, rightfully so, during those few years. And so when you get back to opening up, you got very slim staff, and so you had to be competitive with price on what you're going to pay them. You had to make sure that they enjoyed, and you really instilled in them our work environment and culture and what we were trying to offer. And they also wanted to see what, again, to my point earlier, they wanted to see a growth trajectory. They wanted to know, okay, if I start out at this amount, even if it's the lowest of levels, right, as far as hierarchy and leadership, how can I get to the top, right, as high as I can, as quickly as I can. And so, that was another thing that we hung our hat on, was that these folks are going to come in, we're going to pay them, be competitive and pay, yes, but more importantly, they're going to enjoy to work here, and they are really going to know that they have an opportunity to grow with us.
So that's you know and overall, when you think about the staff that you have or had, right, GMs were staying on average about 2 years. Overall, most of the staff was staying how long?
18 months,
Okay.
15, 18
So then
months.
and that would include personal trainers.
Personal trainers a little less because if they can go make a few extra dollars, or their buddy's they're gonna train their group of friends, right, and they're gonna charge them fifty
Right.
dollars an hour. They're just gonna they're gonna go do that. But
Right.
probably 10 to 12 months for a trainer. In my experiences, I'm sure it's different everywhere, but in my experiences, those trainers aren't as sticky, I guess, as some other team members.
So where did you guys drive your revenue? Like, most of it was membership. What percentage was personal training? Planet Fitness, it was probably very little, I'd imagine.
None. Yeah, it was none. Uh,
Yeah.
because you don't charge for training, right? It's all free. It's all included in your membership with that
Right.
brand. It doesn't
Yeah.
cost you anything extra, So if you were pulling, I'm going to give you a number. if you were pulling 50 grand a month in personal training revenue, you were doing good. If you were pulling 100 grand a month in revenue, you were doing exceptionally good. Great. So anything less than 50, it's really tough to make it in the personal training world, at least in the high volume, low price models. Can you make it with 30 or depends on your expenses, of course, but can you make it with 30 or 40 or 25? Yeah, you can. But it's kind of like getting to that 50, then getting to 100, then getting to 150, then getting to 2, right? I mean, that's kind of the path that we wanted to see ourselves go on. One thing that we learned early on, I think I said at the beginning, was that you can't, even as an operator, even as an owner, you can't take some skills transfer. Absolutely, they do. It's the fitness industry. There's a handful of skills that transfer, but there is a handful that don't amongst brands, and you learn that really
Mm-hmm.
quickly, like personal training and selling it, and how to close the deal, and getting a right personal training manager on board from the start, even before you start. Have a right personal training manager that you feel can drive that business, because it's a business in and of itself. It's completely separate from the membership. It's not tied to the membership in any way whatsoever. Of course, you got to get them to commit to a membership before they can buy training. But outside of that, it's completely separate. And one thing that we learned, we had the idea that, okay, if we can get membership, we'll get training. And it's not the case. You have to have a full dedicated team to training, to coaching, to the whole exercise experience than you do with just having a member services team. Because in the Planet space, you have a couple of trainers, yeah, but they're not. They just have a different sets of skills. And if you don't have that in these other brands, then the ones that really drive personal training to this highest level have mastered that. They got the right personal training manager in place 3 months before they opened, and this personal training manager is working deals, clients, membership, closing deals well before you even open, right? And he's got a team of trainers that are on board already, that if a
Mm-hmm.
client signs up for training, this personal training manager can put them right with a trainer. Not, hey, when we open, we'll get you paired, right? We'll find a trainer for you. No, you got to have it before, so that the snowball already starts to roll before you open.
In a single location, you're doing about 1 million in revenue for membership, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so 10% of that would be good in training. You got 1 million in revenue in membership, you're doing about 10% of that volume in training. And that's a good revenue model right there.
Yeah, if you could, like I said, if you're doing 100 grand a month, you're really churning out well. It doesn't mean you can't make it with less, a lesser percentage, a less amount, but we found that the top dogs in the industry that are really churning some revenue seem, you always look and you say, oh, I'm doing about 100 grand a month in revenue per location in PT alone. Some doing significantly more, right? Some doing significantly less. But that was the goal.
Mm-hmm.
The goal is that 100K mark. And if you can get
Right.
there, then man, are you really churning?
So, that rolls me right into the way, I take a different path here, uh, into operations, because you manage a lot as a COO. There's a lot of things going on within the business, and you're seeing a lot of different components of it. You even touched on sales a little bit. Looking at the technology stack that you guys use, what is it that, and of course I've got to bring this up because I'm an owner of a software company.
Right.
So I've got to bring it up because I want to ask about it.
Sure.
What tech stack were you guys using? Did you have a CRM process? Did you guys use a CRM? Was it tied to something else? I see some of these groups, they're using like 3 or 4 or 5 different tech tools to drive their business, and it almost becomes a little overwhelming for the team members at the locations to log into multiple different tools to try and see what's going on. Like they might have one for reporting, then they have one for CRM, and then they have one for member management, and then they have one for personal training. They have one for access control. So it gets a little overwhelming. So what are you guys, what have you seen in the past? What worked, and what would be the ideal situation?
There's so many out there, right? And different technology stacks and one claiming to be better than the other. We try to keep it as simple as possible, especially in the Crunch brand. Crunch's preferred vendor, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a CRM. That's where you gather all your leads, get poured into this bucket. They're in different channels based on what their questions is or what they have that's an area of concern, or again questions that they may have go through these different buckets. And then you had a dedicated team. Most of the time in our case it was the frontline team, front desk hourly staff member, that would manage these leads for you. um, we I have to say that we quickly learned that there's a lot of leads in here, thousands, right? And we're like, what are we going to do with all these people, and how are we going to reach all these people, right? I mean, they have a 7-day path and a 3-day path and a 2-day path, and you got to respond to this guy today. It's like, again, you're absolutely right. It gets overwhelming. And we finally realized, okay, the GM really needs to take the lead here and coach a team on putting these different leads in different buckets to make sure that they get, in this case, automated response or emails or texts.
Mm-hmm.
And now, manually, you do the phone calls, but other than that, they're on a communication path and they get contacted every X amount of days, and that's all automated. They again, it's about working with those two different platforms, intricately understanding how they work, how the communication to member or prospect is, what channel or what part of the road are they on, right? Are they just at the
Mm-hmm.
beginning? Have they already been contacted before? Or have they been contacted twice and they're what we call a dead lead? They're not going to respond. So we just kind of move on, right, with the other people. So I think they all have the challenges, right? I mean, none of them are perfect, but we found that if we can get them on, simple is not always easy, but if we can just keep it as simple as possible, that our team can reach out and respond to the best of their ability.
So did just out of curiosity, did the CRM platform communicate with ABC,
So that
where like a member is no longer active? So then it triggers a response in the CRM, or a member stopped paying, so it triggers a response in the CRM. So those things happen simultaneously, and or a person in the CRM becomes a member, and so it throws them, now it changes their status in the active status, so to speak, in the member
right.
billing section.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's one that it's almost an age old question, because how do we get a CRM platform to communicate with ABC Fitness? And most of it is because ABC Fitness is so heavily locked down. It takes
Mm-hmm.
a lot of legwork to get those two to communicate with whatever other platform that a brand is using. It's really important that you said it earlier, that you don't have 7 platforms to ultimately do the same thing, right? You don't
Right.
need all these logins. If you can just simplify it and they can communicate, maybe not all the time great at communicating, or there's hiccups for sure.
And that's, I bring that up because that's what we found, was that on the software side, there are a lot of groups that don't have that integration tied. It's not coupled, right? So you don't have this CRM communicating with your member management solution, and so there are breaks in the system. And so that's one of the things we did with our software, was we made sure that whatever platform you're using for your CRM, we integrate directly with it. So that way there's nothing lost, to your point.
Sure,
So
sure. Really important.
bring,
Yep.
bring, bringing into that. So now I want to jump into real quick, because I know we're running out of time here. Marketing. Okay. I don't want to talk too much about marketing, but I do want to talk about what works, what you've seen work, because you've been in the game long enough. We're rolling up on that period of time where, soon we're going to be in the January new year, and everybody's going to join regardless of what offer you put out there. Uh, but we are rolling into the time when people are thinking about Thanksgiving. They're thinking about, taking breaks. We're going to be rolling into the fall here soon. So, and everybody's planning. They're doing financial planning for the business for next year. They're doing marketing planning for their business for next year, and they're trying to finish up their Q4. So what offer works today to drive people in your doors? What's the best offer that you've ever seen? that has worked to get people to come to your club?
Sure, that's a loaded question. I think it comes with it's a multifaceted. I think depending on geography, depending on brand, depending on audience you're trying to reach, it's all a little bit different. But really, I'm going to use Planet Fitness as the example because their marketing budget is astronomical, and from a corporate standpoint, national advertising fund, and that they're anomaly because of how big they are. But we relied heavily. Yes, we had our own internal marketing team, and we ran campaigns based on historical data. Rarely did we run a brand new campaign that had never been tested before. And we always ran campaigns on historical data. How successful was it a couple of years ago or even last year, right? And so the ones that you've probably seen, actually, I know you've seen. So your dollar down, your month free, your no commitment campaigns are kind of the top three that most people kind of gravitate to. And there's nothing groundbreaking in that response. It's just something that has worked for the industry for almost ever. And it's really about, the marketing gets them in the door, gets the door to swing, but it's up to us as operators to keep them and to close the
Oh
deal,
yeah.
obviously. And so, referral programs are huge. If you refer 5 people, you get 2 months free, or if you refer 5 people, you get a $150 gift card, or so there's some competition internally with some marketing programs and campaigns because we want the members to have some fun competing amongst each other. Yeah, I got more referrals than you this month. Oftentimes we had graphics in the club that showed your top referral for the month, right, or the week. And so it just created some internal competition, which was fun. It was fun for the member and the team. There's always the national, you could, Crunch had one a while back. I'm going to butcher it, but something like you could win a Tesla if you did entered to win or something, right? So there's those big campaigns. But what worked for us was as local as you could get, whether that was referrals, local partnerships with the Chamber of Commerce's and being involved at the grassroots level. It was month free campaigns, no commitment campaigns, dollar down, $0 down worked well. So you have no barrier of entry. And I think one thing I'll make a point on marketing, and then I'll be quiet about it, is that marketing only works, in my opinion, if you eliminate as many barriers of entry as you possibly can. If cost is a barrier of entry, you got to eliminate it. If branding to that person is a barrier of entry, you got to create a campaign that eliminates the intimidation factor of a brand. If
Gold's Gym went through that for a while.
they did, Yeah, I think
Yeah.
they're coming around for sure, but if certainly you got to eliminate as many barriers of entry as you can. You're not going to eliminate them all, but price is of course the easiest one to eliminate. But the other thing is too, how are you going to promote the brand in such a way that allows the member to read the shortest amount of material possible and get the most information? And if you could do that while eliminating the other couple of barriers, you'll get that door to swing, in my opinion. I mean, we did. And then it's ultimate up to the training and leadership of that club to close it. But from the marketing standpoint, enter to win and free and $0 down and no commitment and campaign or referrals. All those things have worked for us in the past. We first to market's important. Brand awareness is important. Economies of scale is important. And you can do co-ops where you can have a bigger budget to get the brand out there for sure. But if you're just a 1 or 2 owned location, or you just a mom and pop, if you can just eliminate as many barriers of entry as you possibly can, and most of that starts with price, then that door will swing.
I love it. Trey, awesome stuff. I want to give everybody just kind of quick high level. So, I mean, you talked about the customers in order to keep them, keep your member retention high, and keep more members and keep the attrition low. it's all about who you're hiring. So start there, start with hiring, make sure that you're giving them enough money to stick around. And if you're thinking about having a general manager in your space, create a compensation plan that matches what you guys are bringing in for revenue. And if you're not bringing in a ton of revenue, and you're only bringing enough revenue to support yourself, don't be hiring a general manager, because that doesn't make a lot of sense. So,
Right.
Do the things that make sense for your business. Listen to what Trey had to say about, and if you missed it, rewind, take some notes, but do the things that he had to say about culture and how you build that culture within your team. And I think it really just boils down to being genuine about what you're doing, and be real with the people that you're hiring. So you're getting the people who are like-minded, just like you. And then beyond that, when you're thinking about, keeping staff on board, make sure you're incentivizing them in a way where the value's there for bonuses and compensation, and there's a little bit of team camaraderie and a little bit of competition between your teams, and if you have more than one location, between your clubs. And beyond that, keeping things simple. Okay. Trey and their team, everybody that he's ever worked with, they never made things complex or overly complex to the point where their team didn't understand it. Their own teams also understood P&Ls. That was a big thing for their team to understand what it was that they were bringing in. So they actually knew the numbers. They could see the numbers. They could work off of those numbers. And then last but not least is on the marketing side, do the things simple and eliminate the barriers of entry, reduce the friction for people to come in your door. And like he said, those doors will start swinging. Trey, really loved having you on today, man. Real honor listening to what you had to say, little nuggets of knowledge for those who are listening, and would love to have you back on, because I know you've got some other things in the works. You got more irons in the fire. There's more to be worked on. So more things for us to talk about later. Would love to have you back on later.
My pleasure. Really appreciate the time, and thanks so much.
Of course. And before we close out, I want to get where these listeners can contact you or find you, if you're willing to let them contact you.
Yeah, absolutely. Love talking anything's and all. I guess this is the time where I tell them either an email or LinkedIn link to. Okay.
Yeah.
So
throw those out there.
Yeah, sure. Trey.moser@outlook.com. Trey.moser@outlook.com. Be happy to answer anything. Certainly more than willing and able to provide any resource that I can, as well as LinkedIn. Just Trey Moser on LinkedIn. So really very much appreciate it, Michael, and hopefully we'll be in touch again soon.
Awesome. Thank you, Trey. And that's it today, everyone, for Sweat Success Podcast. Keep tuning in, keep listening in, hit that subscribe button, and share with everybody that you know, because there's a lot of stuff in here, and a lot of it is freaking awesome. Talk to you guys soon.